Hello, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to be reading the last chapter in The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So we are finally to the last half of chapter 10, and we are going to just be finishing this book up. And somehow I have lost my place. My bookmark, I think, is gone. But I do know where I left off at. Okay. So the last portion we read was discussing transforming illness into enlightenment, and the subject of this chapter is the meaning of surrender. And quick note, this book's written in a question and answer format. The author uses pause symbols at the end of certain sections if you want to pause and think on what he just wrote. Just to throw that out there. In case you haven't seen the previous chapters or the previous videos, I think I state that in every single one. So let's go ahead and start with section number 5, when disaster strikes. As far as the still unconscious majority of the population is concerned, only a critical limit situation has the potential to crack the hard shell of the ego and force them into surrender, and so into the awakened state. A limit situation arises when, through some disaster, drastic upheaval, deep loss, or suffering, your whole world is shattered and doesn't make sense anymore. It is an encounter with death, be it physical or psychological. The egoic mind, the creator of this world, collapses. Out of the ashes of the old world, a new world can then come into being. There is no guarantee, of course, that even a limit situation will do it, but the potential is always there. Some people's resistance to what is even intensifies in such a situation, and so it becomes a descent into hell. In others, there may be only a partial surrender, but even that will give them a certain depth and serenity that was not there before. Parts of the ego shell break off, and this allows small amounts of the radiance and peace that lie beyond the mind to shine through. Limit situations have produced many miracles. There have been murderers on death row waiting for execution who, in the last few hours of their lives, experienced the egoless state and the deep joy and peace that come with it. The inner resistance to the situation they found themselves in became so intense as to produce the unbearable suffering, and there was nowhere to run and nothing to escape it, not even a mind-projected future. So they were forced into complete acceptance of the unacceptable. They were forced into surrender. In this way, they were able to enter the state of grace with which comes redemption, complete release from the past. Of course, it is not really the limit situation that makes room for the miracle of grace and redemption, but the act of surrender. So whenever any kind of disaster strikes or something goes wrong, illness, disability, loss of home or fortune, or of a socially defined identity, breakup of a close relationship, death, or suffering of a loved one, or your own impending death, know that there is another side to it, that you are just one step away from something incredible, a complete alchemical transmutation of the base metal of pain and suffering into gold. That one step is called surrender. Sorry, the light's hitting me funny there. I do not mean to say that you will become happy in such a situation. You will not. But fear and pain will become transmuted into an inner peace and serenity that come from a very deep place, from the unmanifested itself. It is the peace of God which passes all understanding. Compared to that, happiness is quite a shallow thing. With this radiant peace comes the realization, not on the level of the mind, but within the depth of your being, that you are indestructible, immortal. This is not a belief. It is absolute certainty that needs no external evidence or proof from some secondary source. Transforming suffering into peace. I read about a Stoic philosopher in ancient Greece who, when he was told that his son had died in an accident, replied, "I knew he was not immortal." Is that surrender? If it is, I don't want it. There are some situations in which surrender seems unnatural and inhuman. Being cut off from your feelings is not surrender, but we don't know what his inner state was when he said those words. In certain extreme situations, it may still be impossible for you to accept the now, but you always get a second chance at surrender. Your first chance is to surrender each moment to the reality of that moment, knowing that what is cannot be undone because it already is. You say yes to what is or accept what isn't. Then you do what you have to do, whatever the situation requires. If you abide in this state of acceptance, you create no more negativity, no more suffering, no more unhappiness. You then live in a state of non-resistance, a state of grace and lightness, free of struggle. Whenever you are unable to do that, whenever you miss that chance, either because you are not generating enough conscious presence to prevent some habitual and unconscious resistant pattern from arising, or because the condition is so extreme as to be absolutely unacceptable to you, then you are creating some form of pain, some form of suffering. It may look as if the situation is creating the suffering, but ultimately this is not so. Your resistance is. Now here is your second chance at surrender. If you cannot accept what is outside, then accept what is inside. If you cannot accept the external condition, accept the internal condition. This means do not resist the pain. Allow it to be there. Surrender to the despair, grief, fear, loneliness, or whatever form the suffering takes. Witness it without labeling it mentally. Embrace it. Then see how the miracle of surrender transmutes deep suffering into deep peace. This is your crucifixion. Let it become your resurrection and ascension. I do not see how one can surrender to suffering. As you yourself pointed out, suffering is non-surrender. How could you surrender to non-surrender? Forget about surrender for a moment. When your pain is deep, all talk of surrender will probably seem futile and meaningless anyway. When your pain is deep, you will likely have a strong urge to escape from it, rather than surrender to it. You don't want to feel what you feel. What could be more normal? But there is no escape. No way out. There are many pseudo-escapes: work, drink, drugs, anger, projection, suppression, and so on. But they don't free you from the pain. Suffering does not diminish in intensity when you make it unconscious. When you deny emotional pain, everything you do or think, as well as your relationships, become contaminated with it. You broadcast it, so to speak, as the energy you emanate, and others will pick it up subliminally. If they are unconscious, they may even feel compelled to attack or hurt you in some way, or you may hurt them in an unconscious projection of your pain. You attract and manifest whatever corresponds to your inner state. When there is no way out, there is still always a way through, so don't turn away from the pain. Face it, feel it fully. Feel it, don't think about it. Express it if necessary, but don't create a script in your mind around it. Give it all your attention to the feeling, not to the person, to the event, or the situation that seems to have caused it. Don't let the mind use the pain to create a victim identity for yourself out of it. Feeling sorry for yourself and telling others your story will keep you stuck in suffering. Since it is impossible to get away from the feeling, the only possibility of change is to move into it. Otherwise, nothing will shift. So give your complete attention to what you feel and refrain from mentally labeling it. As you go into the feeling, be intensely alert. At first, it may seem like a dark and terrifying place, and when the urge to turn away from it comes, observe it, but don't act on it. Keep putting your attention on the pain. Keep feeling the grief, the fear, the dread, the loneliness, whatever it is. Stay alert, stay present with your whole being, with every cell of your body. As you do so, you are bringing a light into this darkness. This is the flame of your consciousness. At this stage, you don't need to be concerned with surrender anymore. It has happened already. How? Full attention is full acceptance, is surrender. By giving full attention, you use the power of the now, which is the power of your presence. No hidden pocket of resistance can survive in it. Presence removes time. Without time, no suffering, no negativity can survive. The acceptance of suffering is a journey into death. Facing deep pain, allowing it to be, taking your attention into it, is to enter death consciously. When you have died this death, you realize there is no death, and there is nothing to fear. Only the ego dies. Imagine a ray of sunlight that has forgotten it is an inseparable part of the sun, and deludes itself into believing it has to fight for survival and create and cling to an identity other than the sun. Would the death of this delusion not be incredibly liberating? Do you want an easy death? Would you rather die without pain, without agony? Then die to the past every moment and let the light of your presence shine away the heavy, time-bound self you thought of as you. There's a pause symbol. Okay. The way of the cross. There are many accounts of people who say they have found God through deep suffering. And there is the Christian expression, the way of the cross, which I suppose points to the same thing. That's a statement coming from somebody. Not all of these are questions. I think you may have noticed, or maybe even having trouble distinguish what the author's saying and what the person that is posing the question or the statement is saying and where he clarifies. So I apologize if that's been an issue. But that was just something that was said to the author, and he's going to respond to this. We are concerned with nothing else here. Strictly speaking, they did not find God through their suffering because suffering implies resistance. They found God through surrender, through total acceptance of what is, into which they were forced by their intense suffering. They must have realized on some level that their pain was self-created. How do you equate surrender with finding God? Since resistance is inseparable from the mind, relinquishment of resistance, surrender, is the end of the mind as your master, the imposter pretending to be you, the false God. All judgment and all negativity dissolve. The realm of being, which had been obscured by the mind, then opens up. Suddenly, a great stillness arises within you, an unfathomable sense of peace. And within that peace, there is great joy. And within that joy, there is love. And at the innermost core, there is the sacred, the immeasurable, that which cannot be named. I don't call it finding God because how can you find that which was never lost, the very life that you are? The word God is limiting not only because of thousands of years of misperception and misuse, but also because it implies an entity other than you. God is being itself, not a being. There can be no subject-object relationship here, no duality, no you and God. God realization is the most natural thing there is. The amazing and incomprehensible fact is not that you can become conscious of God, but that you are not conscious of God. The way of the cross that you mentioned is the old way to enlightenment, and until recently it was the only way. But don't dismiss it or underestimate its efficacy. It still works. The way of the cross is a complete reversal. It means that the worst thing in your life, your cross, turns into the best thing that ever happened to you by forcing you into surrender, into death, forcing you to become as nothing, to become as God, because God too is no thing. At this time, as far as the unconscious majority of humans is concerned, the way of the cross is still the only way. They will only awaken through further suffering, and enlightenment as a collective phenomenon will be predictably preceded by vast upheavals. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of think that's what's happening right now. This process reflects the workings of certain universal laws that govern the growth of consciousness and thus was foreseen by some seers. It is described, among other places, in the book of Revelation or Apocalypse, though cloaked in obscure and sometimes impenetrable symbology. This suffering is inflicted not by God, but by humans on themselves and on each other, as well as by certain defensive measures that the earth, which is a living, intelligent organism, is going to take to protect herself from the onslaught of human madness. However, there is a growing number of humans alive today whose consciousness is sufficiently evolved not to need any more suffering before the realization of enlightenment. You may be one of them. Enlightenment through suffering, the way of the cross, means to be forced into the kingdom of heaven kicking and screaming. You finally surrender because you can't stand the pain anymore, but the pain could go on for a long time until this happens. Enlightenment, consciously chosen, means to relinquish your attachment to past and future and to make the now the main focus of your life. It means choosing to dwell in the state of presence rather than in time. It means saying yes to what is. You then don't need pain anymore. How much more time do you think you will need before you are able to say, I will create no more pain, no more suffering? How much more pain do you need before you can make that choice? If you think that you need more time, you will get more time and more pain. Time and pain are inseparable. The power to choose. What about all those people who, it seems, actually want to suffer? I have a friend whose partner is physically abusive toward her, and her previous relationship was of a similar kind. Why does she choose such men, and why is she refusing to get out of that situation now? Why do so many people actually choose pain? I know that the word choose is a favorite New Age term, but it isn't entirely accurate in this context. It is misleading to say that somebody chose a dysfunctional relationship or any other negative situation in his or her life. Choice implies consciousness, a high degree of consciousness. Without it, you have no choice. Choice begins the moment you disidentify from the mind and its conditioned patterns, the moment you become present. Until you reach that point, you are unconscious, spiritually speaking. This means that you are compelled to think, feel, and act in certain ways according to the conditioning of your mind. That is why Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." This is not related to intelligence in the conventional sense of the word. I have met many highly intelligent and educated people who were also completely unconscious, which is to say completely identified with their mind. In fact, if mental development and increased knowledge are not counterbalanced by a corresponding growth in consciousness, the potential for unhappiness and disaster is very great. Your friend is stuck in a relationship with an abusive partner and not for the first time. Why? No choice. The mind, conditioned as it is by the past, always seeks to recreate what it knows and what it's familiar with. Even if it is painful, at least it is familiar. The mind always adheres to the known. The unknown is dangerous because it has no control over it. That's why the mind dislikes and ignores the present moment. Present moment awareness creates a gap not only in the stream of mind, but also in the past-future continuum. Nothing truly new and creative can come into this world except through that gap, that clear space of infinite possibility. So your friend, being identified with her mind, may be recreating a pattern learned in the past, in which intimacy and abuse are inseparably linked. Alternatively, she may be acting out a mind pattern learned in her early childhood, according to which she is unworthy and deserves to be punished. It is possible, too, that she lives a large part of her life through the pain body, which always seeks more pain on which to feed. Her partner has his own unconscious patterns, which complement hers. Of course, her situation is self-created, but who or what is the self that is doing the creating? A mental, emotional pattern from the past, no more. Why make a self out of it? If you tell her that she has chosen her condition or situation, you are reinforcing her state of mind identification. But is her mind pattern who she is? Is it herself? Is her true identity derived from the past? Show your friend how to be the observing presence behind her thoughts and her emotions. Tell her about the pain body and how to free herself from it. Teach her the art of inner body awareness. Demonstrate to her the meaning of presence. As soon as she is able to access the power of now and thereby break through her conditioned past, she will have a choice. Nobody chooses dysfunction, conflict, pain. Nobody chooses insanity. They happen because there is not enough presence in you to dissolve the past, not enough light to dispel the darkness. You are not fully here. You have not quite woken up yet, and in the meantime, the conditioned mind is running your life. Similarly, if you are one of the many people who have an issue with their parents, if you still harbor resentment about something they did or did not do, then you still believe that they had a choice, that they could have acted differently. It always looks as if people had a choice, but that is an illusion. As long as your mind with its conditioned patterns runs your life, as long as you are your mind, what choice do you have? None. You are not even there. The mind-identified state is severely dysfunctional. It is a form of insanity, and almost everyone is suffering from this illness in varying degrees. The moment you realize this, there can be no more resentment. How can you resent someone's illness? The only appropriate response is compassion. I don't know how well that will set with people, because I do know that in the spiritual community, there is a lot of talk about how you choose your problems in life. And that would include people that are in your life, because that's usually what we have more problems with than anything, is with family members and lovers and children and, in-laws and all that. So I think that might be a little bit controversial for some people. And I have to say, this is not the first well-known spiritual teacher that has said this. And I personally used to believe that I chose all of my challenges and all of my issues ahead of time. And after reading a few books and thinking on it more, I don't really know where I stand on that. But I always respect however anyone wants to believe, because it is their truth. But sometimes I have to stop and step back and go, am I taking things in too easily and just saying, oh, that makes sense. Yep, I believe that. That certainly isn't what happened when I spent 20, 30 years in the Catholic Church. It was just brought up in me, and that's what I believed for so long, because that's what I was brought up to believe as a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or born into a Lutheran family, whatever it may be. So reprogramming yourself and deciding what you're going to take as your belief and what you're not, take your time with that. Just because everybody might be saying that this is why and this is how, that may not resonate with you, and that's okay. It's okay to look at other options. Okay, so let's move on. Now let's see. Okay. What you say about choice also applies to forgiveness, I suppose. You need to be fully conscious and surrender before you can forgive. So that's a statement that someone has made to him. Forgiveness is a term that has been in use for 2,000 years, but most people have a very limited view of what it means. You cannot truly forgive yourself or others as long as you derive your sense of self from the past. Only through accessing the power of now, which is your own power, can there be true forgiveness. This renders the past powerless, and you realize deeply that nothing you ever did or that was ever done to you could touch, even in the slightest, the radiant essence of who you are. The whole concept of forgiveness then becomes unnecessary. And how do I get to that point of realization? When you surrender to what is and so become fully present, the past ceases to have any power. You do not need it anymore. Presence is the key. The now is the key. How will I know when I have surrendered? When you no longer need to ask the question. And that was it, you guys. That was it. So we are all finished with this book. If you didn't see it, I did put a post up under the community part of my page. I posted 2 books and asked which one you guys would like to read, and to please let me know. And if there's enough people, or it really doesn't matter if it's just one person that chooses, I'm happy to read whatever it is that you guys choose of the 2. I have so many books on my, I guess I have a little bookshelf with books that are just for stuff like this, and I have so many of them. But I like to see what resonates with you guys and things that you would be interested in, because some of them are pretty specific. So I hope that you enjoyed this book, and I hope that you took something from it, and I hope that you continue to take something from it, and I hope that you listen to it more than once. I think that's important, especially with this kind of stuff, because it really is stuff that does require thought and does require reflection. And, you know, sometimes listening or reading something once is not enough for me. I know that. So it's nice to have the book and it's nice to have the videos, whichever way you want to go. So if you've been joining me for one or all of these videos, thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for any likes, comments, subscribes, views. I really appreciate them all. It gets my videos out there, and this is good stuff to be out there when there's so much negativity and just so many bad negative things out there to expose yourself to. So this isn't the worst thing, I would say. So until next time, please take care of yourself. Please take care of those around you. I will see you again with the next book that will start very soon. Bye-bye.